welcome to tonight. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to Women Power Our Planet, deploying capital towards climate change. I'm so glad you all are here. Are we all set? Great, welcome. So there's a lot of things we're going to go over. We're going to presence ourselves in a few minutes, but I'm going to just talk about a few logistical things as we kind of all get started and seated. And tonight, I want to share with you all something that I'm the possibility tonight of transformation and empowerment and connection for every single person in this room, if that's something you would like. Is that something you all are up for? Yeah? Okay, awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to be talking about women, because that's what we're highlighting, and I'm going to be talking about capital and wealth. But I want you to know this conversation is for every human being. We're just highlighting an aspect. And I'm going to be talking about money, but there's also so many other currencies and dimensions. So please know I'm holding the totality of a much larger conversation while we're focusing on an aspect here tonight, so we can make it practical and bring it down to the ground and actually act on it. And what's exciting, what kind of inspired this event is women are coming into a vast amount of resources in the next 10 years. I don't know if you've heard the stats, but let's see. Basically, by the year 2030, women will be holding 2/3 of all of the wealth in the United States. So my intention tonight is to co-create a space where we can all reflect inward. You know, this change, this movement, this conversation starts with each individual person. So I want to invite you all to be in your own conversation with yourself while any of us are speaking, and look inwards and know that this aligning shift happens within us. And it can be with $1, it can be around moving your checking account that has $2,000, or it can be about some of the billions of dollars we're talking about. And something I've been really recognizing for myself is that it all matters. Like anything that exists matters. So this isn't about a dollar amount or anything like that. My heart's racing because I'm so excited seeing you all. Yes, so my name's Mira Megs Lathrop, and thank you for asking. I'll introduce myself a little more in a minute. But I'm known as the financier, and my vision is helping us all look within around our relationship to money so we can look forward and create the economies and financial systems that we want to create together. Thank you for asking. Okay, so I will introduce myself a little more, or maybe before I bring Needy up to sort of set the space of the room. I'll introduce them more later. I know I keep saying all these things are later, but they will come. The basis of this event is an organization that Don Gallagher, who I'll introduce later, and Dr. Julie Pullen. There's Don. And Dr. Julie Pullen is maybe back there. We have co-created Women Power Our Planet, and this is our first launch event. And this is a sample of what we want these conversations to be about. And I will introduce them in a bit. So thank you for honoring us with your presence being here. The other basis of this event is an Amazon prophecy. And I'll let you come up and speak to that as a member of our community. Or you can sit, whatever you would like.
If you don't mind, I like to be grounded.
Yeah.
Hi. So my name is Nidhi, and about 20 years ago, John Perkins invited a group of newbie healers to come, and I got scholarship to go work with them. It's the first time he brought the shamans from the Amazon. And it was an amazing honor. It was an amazing weekend. And we did ceremony to invite the eagle and the condor to connect in our hearts. And we all made a vow to celebrate this. We all made a vow to do whatever we had to do to honor this mission and to spread the word. And then as I was doing the ceremony, on my sunflower, there were 2 bees making love. And everyone was laughing, saying, that's the eagle and the condor uniting. You're helping them. And they're like, oh, you're meeting your divine mate soon. And I met my husband-to-be 5 days later. And I was on the shaman, I'm celibate, I don't want men, I'm done, And so we've been together 20 years. And then interestingly, I met Dawn just like a week or 2 ago. And she's like, I want you to do this thing. I had no idea what this was about. And so I thought it was such a blessing and an honor. Things went full circle. And I just got back from my trip for our anniversary 20 years later this morning. I just happened to land. And she's like, please come today. And I think it's all meant to be.
Yes.
So in honor of the condor and the eagle meeting, which is the divine feminine, divine masculine, when they meet, they create and unite something new. So I would like to just start off, if everyone can join me, to do a sound tone. The ancient way to say Om in India, I'm from Mumbai, is Aum. That's also the name of my business. So A-U-M, not O-M. Ah is for manifestation. It's very male. Is female. It's very receptive. You unites them. And that's why we're here. We're inviting everything to be united to create a sacred space and a beautiful world, which we all deserve and we all pray for and we all want for our generations to come. So if everybody could please join me, just take a deep breath, inhale. And just close your eyes, exhale. And just feel yourself from your tailbone connecting down through all these layers of concrete into this earth, into Pachamama. Feel the top of your spine rising to Divine Father, Divine Sky. Focusing on your breath, inhale from your lower belly. By the power of Divine Father, Divine Mother, and Spirit that unites us all, may we all be blessed with flow, with spirit, with prosperity, with vision and wisdom to create the planet of joy that we are meant to be in. Satnam.
Satnam. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, standing in this place of, thank you so much, connection and unity and peace, I'm going to bring some excitement to the table and say we have a stellar panel here tonight that I'm so honored to be talking to and getting to invite their voices into the space. So we're going to jump to it. To kick off, I think, Larry, we'll start with you. And kind of how the night will go is we have the next hour and 10 minutes that will be in this conversation until about 8:30. And then 8:39, hold your questions. I bet you're going to have them. Hold them, and from 8:30 to 9, we'll take questions from you all to the panel. And then from 9 to 9:30, I invite you to stay if you'd like for something I decided to call intentional mingling, which is going to be in the side room over there. And at the end, if there's any pieces of the conversation that aren't complete for you, or you don't feel like you have a clear takeaway, or you'd like to get more information about one of the banks we mentioned and get some collateral, or you're just not ready to leave and want to hang out with the five of us and Dawn and Julie and a few other guests I'll mention later will be in that back room. So you're all invited. Maybe it'll end up being the whole room. That would be my hope. But we'll kind of go in that direction because there'll be some materials back there. So that's the flow, and I'm going to kind of go through and ask a couple rounds of questions to you each. And to kick off, I started to want to just share improvisational bios about each of you, but as I read your bios, there was so little I didn't want to say, because I want you to know who these people are and the impact they're having and the contribution they're making and where they've come from. So I'm going to read a bit, 3 lines or so from your bios. And then each one of you, I'll kind of tell you where to take it from there. And then we are going to do what you and I talked about your now presencing. So we'll do that in the first part for you, and I'll set you up for that. So to introduce you, Larry Ford is the founder and CEO of Conscious Capital Wealth Management. He's dubbed the Shaman of Wall Street by the Washington Post, and The Economist magazine referred to Lawrence as a man of two worlds. NPR named him the finance guru, and the Retirement Income Journal dubbed him as the spiritual advisor. He has dedicated much of his life to being a bridge between the modern world of business and the ancient world of wisdom and the nexus of consciousness and capital. Mr. Ford has had a long career as an entrepreneur, financial advisor, consultant, author, and speakers. And through these mediums, he's helping people and organizations wake up, which we'll do a little something around, and live a life of purpose to use the power of money and capital markets to make the world a better place. And one other thing I want to note about Larry is he's the founder of the Future of Capital in partnership with the UN and its Global Convening Summit at the UN in 2019, and a 2017 Nobel Peace Prize representative for private commerce and capital through the Nobel Peace Prize Forum, as well as his recent work with the Club of Rome and an associate fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, working on a project for a new paradigm for our civilization. So I hope it made sense why I wanted to read that. So, Larry, so you've talked a lot on our conversations, we talked about this now moment and how so often, even those of us that are conscious, trying to be conscious and awake, we're still kind of zombies and we go in and out of like awake state and being unconscious. And so often we are this way with our money too. And you offered to kind of walk us through a presencing experience that might kind of open that up for us. So, and it might be a gentle nudge or it might be a gentle slap in the face, we'll see. But whatever you'd like to walk us through, I'd love to invite you to.
Thank you. So, as I sit here in the, and feeling this group, there's, I think most people are awake. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very, very cool to feel. And it's really nice to be in your presence. And thank you, Dawn, and everyone for putting this together and inviting me. It's a very special event. I find myself on all sorts of different stages, but I'm not normally in the presence of such presence. So thank you for that, first of all. So when the shamans and ancient wisdom come to this part of the world, especially when they come down to this part of the world, they'll look around and be aghast and say, translated, everybody's sleepwalking. Nobody's here. Everybody goes from A to B to A to B with an occasional C mixed in the form of vacation. And they're literally shocked to the bone, to the soul, when they look and see what's happening. And so when we add capital, this thing we've created, right? I mean, what is it? Stop being backed by gold in the early 70s. So when we put that equation into a land of sleepwalkers, we don't have a very good formula happening. And we're starting to see that express itself around the globe. So I think I will do a abbreviated practice because this group is so awake already, but it's kind of fun. And it's something that, as Mira was saying, you know, we all tend to fall asleep during our routines. And being here and being present is one of the most powerful things we can do, especially if we're sharing our own gift of who we are while we do that. So what I'd like everybody to do is to, I'm going to demonstrate it first, which can kind of be funny because it's entirely unfiltered. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to demonstrate it first, and then I'm going to have you guys do this. So the first thing we do is the shamans will call this stalking, which is not what the kids today use as that term. But this is watching your mind and watching your mind with perfection. Impeccably watching your mind and watching your thoughts. So we play a little game with that because the mind doesn't like to be watched because its job is to create and solve problems. And when you start stealing it, it gets all upset. So we play a little game to get us going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit. I'm going to take myself out of myself. I'm going to watch my mind. And I'm going to watch my thoughts come. And when I catch a thought, I'm going to label it either future, past, or present. And I've learned after doing this for many years, if you can't quite figure it out, don't get hung up, just give it a question mark. And that's okay too. Make sense? Okay. I will tell you in working in my work that this is one of the most powerful things, as I'm sure most of you already know because I can feel the energy out there. But it's a really good thing to practice. So let's start this way so we can all be present because there's some amazing people I get to sit next to tonight that you get to hear so we can all fully be present. So I was just thinking about the sushi I had at Grand Central Station for dinner. I told you it's unfiltered. So I label that as past, right? So I breathe that in and I let it out on my breath. So it's a good idea to do this when we do this practice, to actually accentuate your breath. So when you catch that thought, breathe it in and then let that thought go. Then come back to watching your mind. And so my thought now is a present thought, which is about how peaceful this room is and how nice it is to be here. So you guys get the game. So we're going to do this for, let's say, a minute.
Yeah.
Okay? Just 1 minute to tune in. And I have to tell everybody, you don't have to say your thoughts out loud. I did that in front of a very big group once and forgot to tell them that part. It was hilarious. So it's optional, but probably better if you just breathe. So go ahead. We'll time it. 1 minute. Okay, bring yourself back into the room. Thank you for playing, and thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you for presencing us. Well, before we move on to hearing from Georgie, I just want to talk quiet now because I'm so present. I would love to just hear from you, maybe just a short share on what happened for you that had you step into shamanism and bring that part of your life alive and then still want to stay so involved in the financial markets? What was that turning point, or what about that feels important to share with us?
So really just, peeling the onion skin of myself through life, remembering who I am and why I'm here. And, I don't often give myself the credit because I get a lot of help. And so I've been guided from everyday people, from the spirit world, for me to live my purpose because I know that's why I'm here. So I actually would not say that it was a rational choice to stay in the world of Wall Street and capital. But as I arrive in those worlds and been called the rainbow bridge between the two, it's because it's very simple. The two most powerful things our species possess is our consciousness, everything that begins in the immaterial before it materializes in the world. We can use a whole bunch of different names, intentions, whatever we want to use. And this thing called capital that's expressed in many different ways around the world. And I think most of us here realize that we're not necessarily on the best trajectory as a species. And if we want to change things and we want to transform things and we want to do them fast, then let's deal with those two operating systems. It's the most powerful thing we can do. So it's really just been an unfolding. I've been, tumbled by life and my rocks polished, through awakenings and lots of different things that you might label as traumatic, but all of which have been incredible blessings to help me become who I am, to be able to help share and do my small part in helping make the world a better place.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so our next panelist is Georgie Bernadette, and I'm going to read a bit about you too. And thanks for our hilarious and wonderful conversation over the weekend. Georgie is a technology investor and entrepreneur and born-again banker. where she uses her investment banking skills to mobilize billions towards private impact investments, where she is the CEO at Align 17. She's the co-founder and CEO, and if you don't know, Align 17 is a private platform for family offices and ultra-high net worth individuals to identify vetted, impactful investments. So tell us a little bit about you and your story and how this came to be.
Oh my God. So, the story of the reluctant banker.
Yes.
So, yeah. So
Do you want to talk about that already?
So
beginning?
it made my father very upset. He is a communist atheist, and he married a former non-Catholic nun. So I come from the world of spirit and the world of mind, but very much I was programmed, I would say, from very young to the notion that I have a responsibility to improve the world. Like I was part of the solution, and it really stuck to me. I thought I was going to go to work at the UN, actually, and my master's is in foreign service at Georgetown. I was ready to go to the foreign service, and then JP Morgan called, and I became a banker because I figured that's where I could change the world. And the joke was on me back then. It was way too early to do that, but I think to your point, I learned the language of finance. And so I knew the language of diplomacy, I knew the language of spirit, I knew the language of responsibility. I was missing that piece. And now with Align 17, the way I say it is I'm bringing those two worlds together because it's through the power of finance and mobilizing the billions that we need to transform the world that the shift is actually going to happen. So Align 17 was born of that impetus to bring also two worlds together. It's a world that is emerging out of the emergency. We all can feel it. I think people finally are waking up. It takes a heat wave and blood, flooding to make it happen. We all know that it's happening. And that world is aching to connect with the world of high finance. However, finance is very structured. It's very rigid. It sees only what it wants to see, and it's seeking only what it wants to seek. So Align 17 here is a little patch in the system. We basically disguise the world that is emerging so we can enter the world of finance. So all the people that are the clients of the big banks are aching to access this world. The bankers don't have an answer, and we become the solution. So it's a very virtuous circle. The number 17 alludes to the goal number 17 of the UN Global Goals, which is partnership for the goals. So it's radical collaboration, radical creativity, and doing things that everybody told me was not able to be done before. So going back to where I started, it was that girl that was the son of the communist and the son of the nun that was always asking, why not? What if? And let's do it.
Amazing. Thank you. I can't wait to ask you some more questions. Thank you.
Recovering Catholic also.
So next we have Anna Fink, and Anna is the executive director of the Amalgamated Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of Amalgamated Bank. Prior to this, she worked at the Weiss Foundation, holding a program on women's equality in the U.S. and Latin America. So welcome. And so I want to say a little bit about something I read on the brochure you sent me about Amalgamated. But there's more than 5,000 banks in the United States, but none do what they do. Since their founding nearly a century ago, so what year exactly?
1923.
1923. Amalgamated established itself as a bank committed to doing good. So tell us a little bit about your story, how you got here, and a bit about Amalgamated.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mira and Julie and Dawn, especially for really having the vision to put this panel together and bring all of us together tonight. It's really exciting to be here with all of you. I will talk about my story, but I just wanted to, on my way here, I was sort of thinking about this panel and thinking about the things that we were going to talk about, and something just in the sort of opening that you gave and in your remarks, Larry, really, I had been thinking about somebody who really influenced my thinking. My background is really as a community activist and workers' rights activist, and never possibly imagined working in finance until very recently. And somebody who really causes me constantly to think and to question what I'm doing, and also to really motivate me to figure out how we can do more is a theorist, a political science theorist, Nancy Fraser at the New School, and she said, for me, feminism is not simply a matter of getting a smattering of individual women into positions of power and privilege within existing social hierarchies. It is rather about overcoming those hierarchies. This requires challenging the structural sources of gender domination in a capitalist society. And I just am sort of offering that, and we'll talk a little bit about how that connects to how I think about the work I do, but maybe we can come back to that later and how we're thinking about capitalism and the power of women in this space. My own story and my own journey is really about moving resources and expanding the resources available to support social change work. I usually say I started out as a student activist with United Students Against Sweatshops, trying to figure out how to change conditions in the global supply chain for largely women who are working in the textile industry. And I say that because it connects directly to Amalgamated Bank and Amalgamated's story, which I'll also talk about. And over time, I moved across the labor movement, philanthropy, and finally now at a bank in finance in a quest to really ignite more resources and build collective action for equity, dignity, and social change for those most affected. And my work and the work of Amalgamated is really about how we can harness our collective resources and create a different kind of economy, one that's about regenerating, putting money into the communities, into the organizations, into the socially responsible businesses that we need, and moving resources out of an extractive economy and an extractive ecosystem. And this, I think we'll come back to this, but it's really about identifying steps and taking steps, whether that's moving a bank account or moving your investments or thinking more about your investment strategy, or thinking about your charitable giving and where your charitable dollars sit. And each of these are sort of discrete buckets where we can think about how and what the connections are to social change.
Fabulous.
And I'll say a little bit more about Amalgamated as an institution, if that's
Sure,
okay.
please.
So Amalgamated Bank and now the foundation have this incredible legacy and founding story that really embody this social change. It was founded in 1923 by the immigrant women in the sweatshops in New York City who came together and formed the International Ladies Garment Workers Union to create change in their workplace and to create a voice in their workplace. And then also sort of through that action and through lifting their voices, that led to a sweeping set of health and safety reforms and policy and legislative change. And then those same women who formed the union eventually became the Amalgamated Textile Workers Union, also put their money together and formed a bank to support their own communities and families, and that's Amalgamated Bank. I just think that bold vision of women with really meager resources, putting those resources together, using their collective voice, exercising collective action is both incredibly inspiring and incredibly humbling. And that really drives the work that I do at the foundation today, trying to make sure that every charitable dollar that the bank gives back goes to support important social change work and to support leaders, and particularly women of color leaders who are working in their communities. And on the bank side, it means that we think about that in terms of our corporate practice, the kinds of products and policies that we have in place, Amalgamated was the first bank to raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour, and now $20 an hour. We were one of the first banks to go completely fossil fuel free, and I could reel off a bunch of other really awesome things that we try to do and really look for those opportunities on a regular basis.
Wow. Are you guys impressed? Yeah. Just letting that ripple out a little bit. Thank you. Thank you. So Stacy Francis is also with us, and Stacy is the president and CEO of Francis Financial, an independent fee-only wealth management practice dedicated to investment advisory services for women, couples, and those experiencing divorce. She's appeared on CNBC, NBC, PBS, and many other TV outlets. She's been quoted in more than 100 publications, and is just an outstanding individual from our conversations, I can tell already. So thank you for joining us, and I'd love to hear from you just a bit about your story that had you start Francis Financial, and if you want to tell us anything about you and even your story, maybe about your grandfather, or I'd love to hear.
So I don't know if any of you identify with this, but I grew up never thinking I would go into finance and never wanted to really deal with money except, spend it. I seem to be pretty good at that. And so I went into the least finance major you could think of, French and Spanish. And my world came crashing down pretty quickly when I went off to college. In the beginning of my sophomore year, I finally had a heart-to-heart with my grandmother. She and my mother were the most important people in my entire life. And what I didn't understand is why she stayed with my grandfather. You see, they got married when they were 18, and he beat her. Not only, obviously, physically, but she was a shell of herself. There was financial abuse, which is not really talked about very much, but 95% of all physical abuse situations, financial abuse is accompanied along with emotional abuse. It was that conversation when I asked her and again begged her to leave. In fact, I thought it would be okay if she'd moved in my dorm room. I was like, Grandma, I can fit you in here. That's how desperate I was, because when you watch someone you love get hurt over and over again, and you feel helpless. She told me she stayed because of money. And it was that day which was the changing point of my entire life. And I quickly changed my major and added finance in there. And it scared me more than anything, because in math, I was the girl who wouldn't raise my hand. And I tried to figure out the best way of not having to do math. And money and Wall Street scared me even more so. I grew up out in the middle of Michigan with cats, rabbits, dogs, horses, and we grew our own food. Very different. But it was that fear that made me come to New York and start off as an investment banker. And what I quickly learned was that you can be in investment banking, but you still know nothing about how to manage your checkbook, how to invest, the basics, the important things that we as women need to know. And so I went in through the journey of getting my certified financial planning designation. Shortly thereafter, my grandmother passed away in the hospital after my grandfather pushed her down the stairs. That was, for me, then that moment that gave me the courage to do something I didn't think I could do. And so I honored her by creating a charity when I was age 26 called Savvy Ladies. That was about 20 years ago. And we've now worked with over 20,000 women who are economically vulnerable, helping them get financially smart about their finances through workshops, seminars. You go to our website and there's hundreds of TED Talk like topics of anything you can imagine with your finances. And what's great is that it's women that also are us, because guess what? We're economically vulnerable. My grandmother and grandfather were not poor people. But yet, because she didn't have the knowledge and the education about money, she was trapped. And no woman should be trapped. So much of the hashtag Me Too that we saw, women having to stay in these situations. Why? Because they were trapped financially. They couldn't make a decision to leave because it could jeopardize their future, or even worse, that of their family and their loved ones. So how I come to this is from a perspective that money is power. And as soon as I was able to make that equation in my mind, that the wealthier and the more successful I can make myself, the more change I can make in this world. And we can all agree that there's a lot of change that needs to happen. What I love in talking about this topic is that we as women tend to look at money a little differently than some men, not all, but a little over 50% of men believe that they can make social change with their dollars and their resources. That number is almost double that. 75% of women know that and believe that. And so what I say to all of you, no matter where your humble beginnings are, whether you have $10 in your bank account or 10 million, we all need to understand about money. We need to uplift our sisters. We need to support each other to learn about this, because this is our key. And we need that for ourselves, but we also need it for the other wonderful people we love, our daughters, our sisters, our mothers, because money gives us options. Money gives you the ability to make unbelievable, unbelievable change.
Yes, thank you. Can we acknowledge our panelists, our guests? Thank you. So my background, I was a financial advisor for 10 years with Morgan Stanley, and I'm a certified financial planner. And the last 4 years, I've spent designing a money coaching program for Capital One, where people can come and have free one-on-one coaching sessions with a money coach in person and explore their relationship to money. And this has now grown and is in 25 cities across the country, and is amazing. So that's a wonderful resource that's out there. And during my time as a financial advisor and now as a coach, everyone comes to me and just says, well, I want to invest in line with my values, and I want to, invest in things that don't harm the planet. But I've noticed this embedded belief, and a lot of this I've noticed in women, but also in all people in our feminine energy, is there's this belief that there's some level of sacrifice to invest in something that's in alignment for us. Whether we are at a bank that maybe we're not in alignment with, but we think we need to, or we think we need to get the level of return we want to reach our retirement goals. We sometimes might think that we need to invest in something that we don't really agree with, or we aren't in alignment with the impact it's having on the planet. And something that I was very inspired hearing from you, and I know you talk about, is that that's no longer the case. That, this is actually groundbreaking for me to hear this from you and kind of circulate this to the people that I'm talking to, that we can actually invest in things that we are in alignment with and not feel like we're sacrificing our return on investment. Is that something that many of you have been concerned about, that if you invest, that there'll be sacrifice? Yeah, a few of you. So tell us about that. What have you found in that, and what's really the case?
Thank you. First of all, for my other panelists, thank you so much for sharing yourself and your stories and doing the work you're doing out there in the world, and everybody being here late tonight. So You know, it's like when you see a really new actor do a great job in a movie, right? We've all seen someone who's done that, and they get so good and they do such a great job, then they get this thing called typecast, right? Yeah. So they can't get any other type of job because they are known for that type of character, right? Well, that's a whole bunch of what's happened in this whole socially responsible investing area. It's been typecast into this thing. It's like, you know, you have to kind of take a hit in the chin. It's like putting a little bit of money in the collection plate, but you're going to wake up in the morning and feel good about yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of that has been perpetuated by the industry in a couple different ways. The first way is that, unfortunately, a lot of the fear, greed, obfuscation, bullying, and way too much testosterone in our business and the financial services side tends to see an opportunity and greenwash it, right? Let's put on a green brochure, right? So there's not a lot of good intentionality inside of that. And because that, the structure of the portfolio construction breaks down and doesn't perform well. So at the end of the day, what happens is, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, these models have not done well. And people say, well, see? The other aspect of this is also, candidly, just poor asset management. You know, it's not the best asset managers. And some of the asset managers have good intentions, and they're loving, beautiful people with high levels of consciousness, but they don't quite have the other half in place. The third thing, which is really the most important thing that everybody needs to know, is that this is an incredible revolution happening now. Because what happens is, if you think of a funnel on this side over here, this is data and information. And stock analysis is all done based on data of information and forecasting future returns of a company, especially in the public side when we talk about that. And that's primarily what I'm talking about right now. So I'm talking about in the public markets where you can put your everyday dollars. So we all know what's been happening with data. There's been tons of data coming through and blockchain information to be able to understand all the way down through the supply chain of how well they treat their employees, all the way down to the woman picking the cacao in the fields on the other side of the country. So Wall Street beautifully is being undressed with a lot of this information. So taking that plethora of information, and then, which is constantly moving, and turning that into responsible, good portfolios is exactly what's happening today. And there's a couple things to also keep in mind is what I call conscious alpha. So when you're looking at the traditional data, you need to trust in God, but tie your camel when you do this work, right? So you need to pay attention to the basics of good stock analysis. But there's also this stuff called this ooey gooey kind of stuff, like, you know, how much people love their company, right? What's the ratio of the highest paid to the lowest paid in an organization? There's a lot of really beautiful indicators where we can now take those and add those with traditional statistics and build much better portfolios and actually get alpha from that. So the thing to take away today is tactically managed portfolios are critical today in this world because it's constantly moving. So it's very difficult, and this could be, you know, a thing of contention, and we can go back and forth if people disagree on the panel. It'll be a good conversation. But from my point of view is, because things are moving so quickly, you have to be watching everything and managing things and changing things inside a portfolio. So that's the one thing to think of. And the second thing is, you truly can do good and do well in the world today. You truly can do that and don't need to sacrifice returns. You never have to say you're sorry for doing well, ever. But be careful when you do that to make sure you're working with an operation that also manages both sides well and does it responsibly. But it's an exciting time. This is a revolution. And we are going to move millions and millions and billions of dollars for good and align that with your values. And guess what happens when that happens? The tail starts to wag the dog, right? Isn't that fun? So can I share very quickly a vision? Okay,
Yep.
So here's my fun little vision. So one of these buildings downtown here, think about 45 floors up, right? And you got this traditional CEO, and he's looking out the window, just smoked his cigar, and he's looking out the window, and he's saying, yelling at his board, who are all quivering behind him at the table. And he says, looking out the window at this other company, says, how come their stock is going up and their cost of capital is going down? And ours is doing the exact opposite. Finally, one little timid soul at the table speaks up and says, well, it's because they're doing all that good stuff. And he says, well, let's do that good stuff too. So the point is, that's the power we all have, right? Let's drive our money to the good guys without sacrificing any returns, and we change the world.
I love it. One other last
I'm excitable, aren't I?
One last thing, Larry, when you talk about that we can't have true wealth without overall health, could you say a few words about that, or is that kind of wrapped in there?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll just use an example. So I don't want to get into an advertisement, but we're really transforming the way business is done. And Stacy, I can sound, it's clearly you're doing it as well on the retail side, it sounds like. But the whole environment of love and acceptance versus, you know, I'm smarter than you, right? Fear me, I'm going to tell you what to do, right? That's the old style. So we demonstrate that in a really cool way with our one of our centers. We're opening up another in Boulder, Colorado, as I speak. But in Connecticut, we have a center for health and wealth. You heard that right, health and wealth. So when you walk in, it's much more spa-like than Bull and Bear. You get the music, you get the sounds.
right.
We have a director of physical fitness, a director of nutrition, a director of life transitions, who's a 30-year therapist. So we wrap the whole thing with love into a conversation. And we have two basic principles of how we do this, because your overall health has to do with your life and your purpose and what you're doing. And money, as all of you guys were saying, is just a tool, right, to help you get there. So we have a very simple principle, and we say to people, if you think it's weird, then go around the corner to the other place. But beyond basic needs, money is useless unless it's supporting your dreams, your purpose, and your reason for being here. And by the way, while you're sleeping, you might as well know what your money's up to. Most good people would rather not have their money support child labor in a third world country or degrade the earth or add to climate issues. And you don't have to sacrifice to do that. So our overall health and spiritual health has been, you know, compromised by this thing called capital. I mean, let's face it, folks, it's been weaponized, totally weaponized. And that's why women, of course, which I'm not one, but I would like to call it the feminine energy, right? So the balance of the feminine energy in our world is long overdue. And there have been beautiful prophecies of the Kali age, the Condor. It's just where we are. This is what's happening. And so I would like to make one plea to everybody in case I don't get a chance, and then I'll be quiet. And that is...
I'll let you have a call to action at the end.
Oh, perfect.
Do you want to do it then?
I'll hold that.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Great. I'll give you plenty of space for that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Inspiring. So, Georgie, I want to bring us back to climate for a minute. So when we talked this weekend, the first thing you brought kind of presence to was the heat, you know, and you were kind of saying... Yes. Yeah. And you brought our attention right away to how there's stuff going on. It's all happening around us if we're just actually present to what's happening. Like the signs are here, the solutions are around us, the reality is here. And so much of what I got from our conversation was something you seem to really stand for, which is helping yourself get really present to what's going on and letting yourself actually feel and recognize that as a way to potentially mobilize action. But I wonder if you might also do that for other people. But what would you say about that? The importance of us getting present to what's really going on.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm a party pooper sometimes because I like talking about climate change. So the signs have been there forever for anybody who wanted to see. You know, Julie and all the scientists have been warning us. The scientists are not known for talking in public. They're not known for, you know, doing press releases. The scientists have been screaming at us, and now now animals are screaming at us. The world is screaming at us. Forests are screaming at us, and we're finally listening, right? So it's very easy to stay asleep because it hurts too much to feel. So. The condor is Latin, and Latins like to feel. And my boyfriend always says that I'm always feeling ahead of time. But I tell him that from the feeling comes the action.
Yes.
So I think part of the personal work is to not avoid feeling it. Because once you feel it, then you can stop. and then the answer can come, then the path can come, then the action will come, the inspiration will come. But if you shut yourself from feeling what's going on and you move on into the action, immediately you're trying to do something, it's not going to come with the elegance and with the joy that we need, right? And it goes back to, I was talking to somebody today, I forgot the author, but she said, don't invite me to your revolution if I can dance, right? So if we're not going to have fun while we're changing the world, might as well fall asleep, right? So on the climate change side, you see there's two things happening right now. There's the bad news, actually, is that if you take into account every single electricity generator that power plants in the world that have been built, are being built, or are being already invested into being built, it's game over. We're like up to 2, if not like more than 3-degree change. However, recently, bless the scientists, they've been doing hard research in terms of the impact of forests to climate change. So we knew they had positive impact in terms of carbon sequestration and biodiversity. There's much more positive impact now, we know. There's enough space in the world to make it happen. It takes only $300 billion, and it's joyful. I mean, who doesn't like trees, right? So it crossed through cultures, generations, states of mind. So that's the positive news, that when you look at climate change, we still have a chance, actually. But we need to make the decision now. Now, the thing that I work in the non-liquid space, so private equity, if you invest, in a company, it'll take you 5 to 10 years to get your return. So mostly with the large funds of the world that are trying to solve, the big problems, but through private equity. So the challenge with private equity right now that I see is that those investments, those decisions are being made already. We're locking in decisions that are bad for the future. So the sense of urgency for the work that I do is very it's a non-stop every day. Why? Because whereas in public markets you can go in and out, liquid, there's less immediate consequence, I would say, in terms of the impact, because there's less intentionality. You can embed a lens of impact to something that is not necessarily an underlying, an impactful project. When you're investing for impact investing, your intention is the impact. We cover 16 of the 17 global goals. We are seeking to address, water inefficiency, seeking to address forestation, climate change, plant-based food. We have some of the companies and investors that invested in Beyond, for example, but they're investing on the private side. But then you have the other world of private equity that is completely twisted, investing in everything that is destroying this world. So the urgency that I feel comes because I'm seeing it, I'm feeling it, and I'm experiencing it. So there's, if there was a moment where you were looking for a sign, this is it. And like Greta says, this is the time to pull the emergency brakes, and let's have fun while we do it.
Thank you. Thank you. This is the moment I do want to introduce Julie Pullen. Is she back there? If you want to stand up and say hi. So I had the privilege so Julie is the other co-founder I mentioned briefly at the beginning of Woman Power Planet, and she was recognized with an award last night for her contributions to the River Project. But she's a climate scientist working on projections of heat waves and floods at the very local scale, who has worked internationally to build better prediction tools across the earth sciences. So I'm very happy.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you for your contributions. Yeah. Before we move on, I do want to chat with you about one more thing, and that is we talked so much about these the two worlds going on and the two stories, and how there's our current paradigm and the current system, and there's a new system. There's a lot of new organizations. There's a whole new ecosystem going on. But these two communities, these two worlds just aren't in full communication yet. There's not a solid bridge or channel between it. But I was very inspired to really begin believing and have this confirmation that these worlds are existing, and we're reaching towards each other. Yeah. And you're really playing a role of a bridge and a patch, as you say. Can you
I like sci-fi.
speak to that?
Yeah.
Yes, and feel free to share the sci-fi story too. Or I could say what you said.
My son is a Trekkie, and he will not like if I do the Star Wars story. So, which one do you want to take?
Let's talk about the two worlds.
The two
and the
worlds,
bridge.
yes.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be even more specific. The world that is emerging out of the emergency is the world that we all right now, I think, one way or another, are part of. Right? It's the world that is awake, is joyful, is the social entrepreneurs, is the big corporations, it's the fourth sector, companies, it's people working at the UN doing solutions, technology, UNDP, like multi-sectorial, just massive global effort to make sure that we get to the ground to that lady who's picking the coffee in the right way, right? And that the weather is good enough for her to continue, and livelihoods are decent and equitable, and we live in a world where everybody lives a fair and sustainable life. And let's not forget the animals as well. So that world is happening. Now, that world, right now, the way we know it, we need at least 3 to 5 trillion, depending on the number, every year for that world to actually be realized. So that's a lot of money, and that money can only be found in the worlds of high finance. The world of high finance right now just can't see that world. It's too small. For them, in their lens, it's too small. Let me give you an example. The funds that we work with, they're on average, I would say, 70 million, 100 million, $200 million. Too small for the large bank. We were founded together with UBS, which is the #1 private wealth bank in the world. They're my investor, they're my first distribution partner. If you have a fund today, $100 million fund, and you knock on the door of UBS, which is the largest distributor, they say, come back 5 years later when you have a fund that is at least $500 million, and then you can talk to our clients. But guess what? To your point, inside UBS right now, all of their clients are asking to invest with impact. It's very female. It's very next gen, which is beautiful, but they're unapologetically wanting to do it. So now you have this tension between the two worlds, right? You have the typical 30-year-old heiress, $4 billion full-on portfolio in impact, and she wants to sit with the bankers explaining to her how will she deploy her full portfolio into impact investing, and the banks don't have an answer. So Alliance 17 was formed as that patch in the system where I can see this world emerging. I can make sure that they are presented the right way, they're structured the right way, they speak the right language, and where I'm able to sit them down at the table with that next gen, right? And that's the only way that we're going to be able to mobilize the billions and trillions that need to be just massive flow of capital. And yes. And the sci-fi story is that this is what you guys have to do. It's just you have to find that little, somebody when they were building the Death Star, they forgot that little spot. You can find that blind spot every day where you are. And you just go there. You just go there. And you ninja your way through. And you start waking people up. And there's so many people that are ready. And so that's how I do it. And I think everybody can do it also. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
How'd you do, Lucas?
He's a Trekkie.
So Anna, you've talked a bit to me about how kind of your passion that came early on around resources moving towards things that you care about. What have you found has helped that, or what's influencing that? What helps money move towards those things?
Yeah, well, I think each of us on this panel, I'm really impressed. We all have something in common around a family connection that's motivating what we do. And my own great-grandmother was worked in a textile factory and was a member of the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union. So when I had the opportunity to come to Amalgamated Bank, it just sort of reinforced for me the real responsibility that I have and that legacy, and sort of thinking about what I can do in this role and what I can do with each dollar on the foundation side, and also how I can sort of work within Amalgamated to make sure we're using every tool in our toolbox to support the kind of social change that we're committed to. This isn't something we talked about, but the Amalgamated Bank went public last year, and our story and the sort of success of our IPO was our values story. And we sort of went on the street and talked about the values, the commitment of the bank, and our vision to be a financial partner for social change. And I think that really resonated. And it also made us a unique institution that's different from every other financial institution out there, and unique in that if we stopped holding that commitment, we would be just like any other financial institution. So it sort of reinforced for investors that the reason that they should invest in Amalgamated as an institution is because of our values.
Definitely. Thank you.
And I think in terms of my own little piece and the way I think about where to have impact and responsibility, the foundation sort of does that in three ways. One, really thinking about how the bank's giving and our sort of overall charitable strategy supports collective action, supports power building, and sort of reinforces and lives up to that legacy. And so we have a commitment to groups like Groundswell for Reproductive Justice, the Climate Justice Alliance. We've supported Color of Change and United We Dream, who are working with frontline communities of immigrants and people of color. And then we also have a donor-advised fund platform where we work with individuals around their own giving strategies, ensuring that they have both the tools and connections they need to be able to find the organizations doing frontline work that they want to support, and making sure that we're creating a nimble and efficient way to move those resources directly to the field. And then the third is really figuring out how we make sure we're exercising both our corporate voice and our foundation voice as a leader in this space. We were the first donor-advised fund to to screen out hate groups and take a stand and say charitable dollars should not be supporting hate. And on the bank side, we're using that leadership voice. We launched a carbon accounting platform so that we're looking at the carbon impact of every single dollar that goes out our door in lending. And we've created that and are working with a Dutch firm to make that an open source technology and encourage other financial institutions to do the same thing.
Amazing. Wow. Your bank really embodies responsibility, and you do as well, and your relationship to it, that really stands out. How would you define economic justice, and what does that mean to you?
Really, I think it goes back to dignity and collective power, and allowing people not only to sort of feel that personal empowerment, but to collectively feel like they have a voice and a ability to influence their future.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So Stacy, something what we have in common is working with a lot of women around empowerment and money. And what do you think is possible when this power is unlocked inside of women? What else would you say about that? What do you see as a possible future?
You know, I think I'm a great example of someone who was as phobic as you could be about numbers, and I love my job. It's the best thing in the world. So I started a company right after I started the charity called Francis Financial that you had talked about a little bit before. And we now manage about $300 million, primarily all women. And they're typically single women who have to have their money work for them. And 84% of them want their investments to reflect their values. And what I think is really powerful and important for everyone to know is that getting on top of your money and learning this stuff is so not rocket science. It's not. It's not rocket science. And there are words that can be thrown around, standard deviation, alpha, capital, things like that. For a lot of us, those things don't really mean a lot to you. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like just learning a new language. No one would expect you to know French if you hadn't studied it, right? So how are you going to really know all of the things with investing and with financial planning and finance if you haven't learned it, right? So you start step by step. And I have to tell you, women, we actually have the demeanor and the mindset to be better investors. Why? Because us as women, we tend to take our time and research. So we'll look at all of the wonderful socially conscious mutual funds and companies out there, and we'll really research to find one that reflects our values, that's going to give us maybe the growth or the income we need in our portfolio. We don't do it as like a one-shot in and out. We tend to stay with our investments once we make those decisions in both good times and bad. So we tend not to be the day traders, which means that we perform better over time, which is great. The other thing that's really powerful about us as women is that we are very good about knowing what we know and also being comfortable saying what we don't know, right? And what do? We reach out to our community. Maybe it's a community like we have here tonight. It could be a community of friends. It could be a book club that you start talking about money. We host money circles nearly every single month where we talk about money. There are so many great things that you can do to get familiar and get comfortable with this. And it's like going to the gym. Has anyone taken a few month hiatus from working out? Okay, please don't have it just be me. Thank you. And how does it feel when you're that first day back? It sucks. Let's be honest. Yes, after you're done, you're elated. You're like, I did it. But it sucks, and you're sore. But guess what? You keep on doing it, and then it gets easier. And I have to tell you, if you take anything from this evening tonight, is that you can do this, and whatever your level of means, you can make a difference. And you have power. And so that's what my gift, I really want you all to know, is that you got this. You totally got this.
Awesome. Thank you. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes before we go to the Q&A, I want to give you each a chance to say if there's any last thing that you feel like needs to be a part of the conversation that you want to kind of shout out there for a minute or two. And then, most importantly, this is the time to give your call to action, meaning what do you think is possible for each of us to do, any person, that would move the needle the most, something that we could consider taking on. So you can each go for several minutes, and would you like to just keep the order going, or that looks like you got something.
Okay. The one thing I guess I would just sort of want to say is I think you started out with this really powerful set of statistics around the financial power that women are coming into and the opportunity that creates. And I think that's so true. Yes. And I think it's never before have women been so deeply under attack in this country as women, as mothers, our reproductive rights. We see what's happening with women and children at the border, and it's really, our lives are on the line in so many ways. So it's not just an opportunity, but it's a critical moment for us. Yeah. And I think those are not disconnected things. Yeah. And I know that everyone here probably really feels that too. And so I think the opportunity is really to figure out and take that and do something with our finances, with our voices, with our advocacy, with our dollars that we can give, invest, move from one institution to the other, to another. I just think there's so many levers that we can pull, and now is the time.
Yes, thank you, thank you. One of the main intentions of Women Power Our Planet is to give this time to think of where your money is invested and be able to pause, and in the spirit of community and fun, if you want to make changes to have it be right for you, you can. So you're really speaking to the space and the environment we want to create of divesting and investing, so I'll introduce some people involved with that later. So, yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah, you can take a few minutes if you'd like.
So no matter, whenever we invest, we're making a decision of what the future will be. So that's kind of the point, that it doesn't matter what the size is. It's about what do you want the future to be. And that has a lot to do, I think, as you said, with how you feel in the present. It goes back to the feeling. I think this is a moment for just radical self-care, like unapologetically self-care. Like somebody told me, what was it? Self-care is not selfish. So that should be your mantra. So I'm a mom, I'm a girlfriend, I'm a CEO, I'm a friend, we're everything. And so taking care of ourselves, because we will be responsible, and because we're responsible, because we're making it happen, it's more essential than ever. And the last word in Spanish, since we're talking about the condor, it's a poem that I love. It's just a phrase, it's caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. There is no road. We create the road when we walk. So I think this is where we get to start walking.
Yes, yes. I do want to say a bold statement, and that is that I believe everybody in this room is part of building a new economy. So there's no coincidence that you're here in the room. It's synchronistic. So you're playing a role, and you're in this conversation, and it's happening now. Here we are. This is what it looks like. You didn't think it'd be on backjacks, but no. So.
Okay, I'll be brief so we can leave it open for a lot of questions. So the shamans will say this is all a dream. And the reason for so many of us that this has become a hell is because we're asleep inside the dream. So wake up, know you matter deeply. Every single person is such a critical part of this entire web. This isn't some kind of new age babble. This is the truth. We are all woven into this fabric, and we are all one. So when I hurt you, I hurt myself. It's not some intellectual discussion. So when you go home, what time is it?
It's 8:25.
It's 8:25. Do you know where your money is?
No, really, he's asking you right now.
Do you know where your money is? Because being unconscious is no longer an excuse. So go home with compassion and love for yourself, but realize that you can make a difference, whether it's $100 or whether it's $100 million. Every bit counts, because every good revolution has always and will always begin with everyday people.
Thank you.
I would love to piggyback off that, because I was talking to a fellow financial planner, and I'm really fortunate. I'm part of this group. Only about 1% of financial planning, wealth management firms have a female owner. And so there's a group of us. We're small. But we meet once a year, and we have so much fun. And I asked her, how do you get your clients to care about their future and the world's future? And she said something that I just has always stayed with me, and I want to share this with you. Ask him this question: do you love yourself today? Do you love yourself today? You can answer that in your head, and I hope that's a yes. Are you going to love yourself tomorrow? Yes. So act today for your future self, that wonderful woman that you will love as much, if not more, tomorrow. And create the world, create the financial security and the opportunity that she deserves in the future. And I just thought that was really, really special. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so hearing those very powerful and integral call to actions, this is a chance for any questions you might have. So there'll be mics, they'll be passed around. So who has a question for someone on the panel? We'll go here to Jim right there.
Hi, thank you so much for all the work you do, and thank you to my great friend Mira for organizing this. My question may be helpful or troubling, I don't know. Imagine that the climate crisis, which is part of the topic for tonight, was an asteroid heading to Earth, and we knew it was going to come here within 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, something in that range. There's probably going to be little asteroids around it. Some will arrive sooner, some later. They were going to do massive damage, and the big one was going to maybe wreck everything. And it was a sci-fi movie. The world would mobilize, the rules would change, everything would be restructured because it was so clear that this was priority. Even though a lot of amazing stuff is going on, it still feels to me that we're not really dealing with the scale of the problem. And it's often said that if you're not dealing a solution at the scale of the problem, it's almost irresponsible, maybe even immoral. So I wonder sometimes whether this world of social impact investing, massive responsible actions and activities and new organizations and initiatives, which I'm part of, which many of my friends are part of, and I all love them for doing it. I wonder if we're kind of improving the social and environmental status on the Titanic. In other words, we're doing better than we were doing, so we feel better, we feel like a moral person individually on the Titanic before we hit the iceberg or before the asteroid hits the Earth. We say, I'm part of this too, we want to do well while we're doing good. And we're saying that as if we're the people who are awake, who are pointing out, hey, the emperor has no clothes about this whole system. But we're all so deeply embedded, even our social impact investing companies are so deeply embedded that it's like we're also in the emperor clothing business at the same time. So my question to you is, when we're doing all this good work, is it our ethical obligation to take a step back even further than the major steps back in perspective that you've already taken, and ask ourselves, given the scale of the situation we're facing right now, whether what is considered edgy, what is considered progressive, is simply not radical and impactful enough to the scale of the challenge we face?
So I'm going to jump right in, if that's okay. That's a great question. I'll answer it quickly. The answer is to both, right? So we have to do what we can do and not get lost in the maze of paralysis because we can't make a difference. And I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm saying is around the environmental, social, and governance investing, so we get into numbers a little bit, statistics, we can lift about 20% improvement. After that, all of the companies are incentivized to do bad. So the rules incent them to do bad. So if they all started doing good, 80% of their value would decrease in their productivity. You following me? And I believe that's what you're asking. So I would like everybody to realize what we need to do, and I think this is what you're saying, is we need to address the underlying operating system. of our economies. It's broken. It's been a very cute experiment. It's raised millions from poverty, so it's done some good things, but it's fundamentally broken. It's broken, and we know it's broken. So at a little advertisement here, but it's all of a nonprofit thing. I'd love everybody to go to futureofcapital.org. That is the work that I'm leading with the United Nations to address just that issue. And so we're bringing together global leaders from around the world in multi-stakeholder areas, including indigenous, top economists, top academics, private banking, public, and getting to the point of that operating system so we can make that change in time. So that's a brilliant question, and I think we need to do both, not just one. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
It's, well, yeah, September 11th, 12th, and 13th, we're going to be meeting at the UN for 2 days with some brilliant people, and none of us know the answer, but we're all hoping we have one hand on the elephant. So it's a beginning.
What do you think is broken? Like, what is the actual thing?
Wait for the microphone so we can have you on the...
What have you identified as being the broken thing in our economy?
So I don't want to dominate this. I'll say something very quickly. From my point of view in my work in consciousness and transformation and love of people, what I see is that fundamentally we are flawed. We're not perfect as human beings. And what happens is man, meaning man and women can do it better than men, but we can't handle power. So when we have too much power, something happens in our brain that shuts down the compassion meter. It's been studied in neuroscience over and over again. We can't handle it. And then we look at the discrepancy of wealth and what we're doing in weaponizing capital and money. That's where we've got. So there has to be some settings inside the system that compensate for our flaws. That's my point of view.
Great. Next up, is Stephen Donziger here, by the way? Stephen. Where's Stephen? Stephen. Great. So Stephen is one of our honored guests. We'll keep going with questions. I'm going to give him a few minutes now. Stephen, hi, is an advocate and a writer and speaker. And I want to ask Stephen, can he? Yeah, he can hear me even though he's way over there. What are some of the innovative ways people can channel their resources that protect these indigenous communities that you've been an advocate for, and also just the planet? And feel free just to say a quick hello and thank you for being
hi.
here.
Thank you for inviting me. Can everybody hear me? And kudos to the panel. Really interesting discussion. So real quickly, I'm working the law business. I'm a lawyer, and I have worked for over 20 years in the Amazon of Ecuador. And I represent, along with a bunch of other lawyers, indigenous groups who are fighting oil development and trying to get compensation for pollution. One thing I want to mention is if you sort of, where the rubber meets the road in my work is moving capital into human rights legal work. And what we've been able to do is raise significant capital, some from litigation hedge funds, which is like a new business. I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with that. And move it into claims of people who do not have any money, but their claims are very valuable, and you can monetize a lot of their aspirations and bring lawsuits that can achieve real outcomes that potentially or often do move significant amounts of capital from the fossil fuel industry to indigenous groups and really create incentives to block oil drilling in sensitive ecosystems. So, and also it's sort of a way to, I think, do good and do well because returns on some of the litigation stuff can often be quite high. So, there's very practical ways to deploy capital in a way that I think you can, force multiply and significantly increase costs for what I think is the most destructive force on the planet, which is the fossil fuel industry. If we want to save the planet, we have to move away from fossil fuels and, move into clean energy. So, what we've done in Ecuador is just sort of one small little piece, but it's just something to think about as people sort of think about practical ways that they can, deploy their money to do good.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Yeah, maybe we'll do the mic to the person right next to you.
Yeah, I would love to hear from women who are here, which is the vast majority of us, instead of it going to another man. Thank you.
Thank you for that request. I think it probably will.
Thanks. Okay, I'm just going to step out to see the guys. Hello. Thank you
Hi.
so much, guys, for this talk. It actually gave me so much hope in the financial world. I had a very limited belief that they all just sold their soul and they're for money.
Bankers are people too.
Right. I have a very specific question. I've been working for the last 2 years on creating a virtual reality film about sex trafficking in New York, in which you can experience the transaction from 3 points of view, of a girl, a pimp, and a sex client, and truly relive it, and then also live in their past and experience each of these people's trauma to understand how they became who they are today. And of course, I ran into the troubles of raising money for it. And it was almost like I can make a film about making this film by now, of just reaching out to people and explaining the ROI, how our society would get so much better if they would just only experience this deep sense of compassion for humanity. And I was just wondering if you have specific suggestions for organizations or companies that are truly willing to invest in such thing that doesn't have financial ROI, yet for society it's incredible. And going deeper even into just storytelling, I believe if we start actively sharing stories that rewire our brain and inspire girls and boys to step into their true power and the true responsibility, we can affect the world globally, for which I think would be awesome to have a new media channel almost of stories. But to begin just with a film.
Well, that
Thank you.
sounds like an awesome and inspiring project you're working on. I think that's one of the places where there's an intersection between charitable dollars and charitable giving and impact investing, and the opportunity to invest in projects that do have an ROI. We just did our first direct impact investment through our donor advised fund platform, and it was to a really cool fund here in New York called the Inclusive Arts Economy Fund, I think, at LISC, which is a local CDFI. And the goal of that fund is to support artists and the role that artists play in creating a different kind of economy. So that's one suggestion, but I do think that whole world might be an interesting place for you to look.
For Savvy Ladies, I quickly realized it was going to be a nonprofit and that we could do more good by being a nonprofit. And just so you know, there are many ways that you can do good without being a charity. And I think that's really important. I find, just to give you an idea, running my wealth management firm and running my charity, the charity is much more difficult from a perspective of funding. But for the work that we're doing, similar to what you just said, through Savvy Ladies, which is all pro bono financial counseling and support, I realized that I was going to be able to access dollars being a 501c3 charity that I would not have been able to access if I was a for-profit. So I throw that out to you just to think. You may not want to be a nonprofit just for this project, but it could be, if this is part of your mission and part of that bigger conversation you want to have, look into the work for yourself to do that, to create that organization. But before you even do that, also look into other nonprofits that are focused on sex trafficking that can possibly bring you under that umbrella to give you funding, to give you support to make that project a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was
Did you
just going to
wanna add
mention the New York City actually has a fund for female movie producers and directors. And I think I have the number. I can connect you to them, actually.
Thank you
Of the
so
group.
much.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you.
I just want to say, speak to me after as well. I have a connection for you that it might work out really well for you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, how about Florencia? And then we'll do you if you still had next.
Hi, I just want to thank all of you for this beautiful experience. I do a lot of work with educating and kind of being the bridge between indigenous communities and the modern culture. I think a good amount of you have tried cacao, and for me it's been a beautiful way to be able to share what we receive from these ancestral roots and the communities. And my brother and I started a company, and we're at that point where it's that make it or break it. And I would love to know if you guys have any advice on for small companies that are wanting to scale on a large level, but still keeping that integrity of really being, within the system, but shifting away from the system. I'd love to know if you have any websites or any funds that you would recommend us getting into.
I mean, we bank a lot of socially responsible businesses and nonprofits. We're a B Corp ourselves, and I think the whole B Corp movement is a really exciting way to sort of demonstrate the values that you have as a company and creates a community around that. So, we'd love to be a resource. Definitely happy to talk more about it.
And I also would just say, and you may not have meant this in your question, scaling your business to be large doesn't detract from its core values and its passion. You can have phenomenally large companies that live that core value and passion every day, and companies that are small seedlings that do none of that. So there's no sacrificing the way you want to do business just because of your size. And I think that is a myth. So we should definitely let that myth go.
Yeah. And something, Florencia, I'd love to offer you is so often I work with a lot of people growing their businesses and organizations, and so much of it as women is asking for support and asking for help and making those requests, kind of like we've talked about that in our community. We kind of ask people to be involved, and who knows what comes in, funding, resources, introductions, ideas. So I just sort of encourage you to source this in community. And I think all the resources are around us. And so much of this mindset, this shift in our mindset for our businesses to go to the next level comes from us stepping into the abundant field and into a recognition of that this is a quantum space. We're beyond time and space. It's all here. So it's just building these bridges to everything that you need, and we're all here supporting you. Yeah. Yes.
Do you see a future where we move away from the broken, economy, where the false creation of value for companies who are actually just trying to sell more and create more pollution? And when we see valuation of the companies and not only from the part of the false creation of value through rumors that some traders can make, or through these new companies, it's not the ones who are creating clean technologies who are getting the most hype. It's like Facebook, and so do you see a future where we're going to move away from that to real creation of value and real impact, and where the hype will really go there?
Oh, I thought I can say something. Well, so much of that is the basis of tonight, is all of us putting our energy towards those things that we want to have, our attention, our intentions, our currencies towards the new economy. So it's up to us. And it is happening now. And these two worlds, it is existing. They just haven't, we're not connected, you know? So it's so much of what I find to be true is that connection is our doorway to this. Being connected with ourselves, being connected with each other, businesses moving from competition to radical collaboration. I mean, there's a lot of principles to this new economy that are what are creating it. And we all, these little shifts that we all can make, whether they're these internal alignments or these really aligned external actions, are what's creating it. So it is happening, and you know the fears can arise that maybe it's not, and maybe this is just going to take over. But we're at that turning point where it's up to all of us to kind of step into our part in that, internally and externally.
And I think to your point, I mean, the signal is there. You just have to like stop. And I think it goes back. Somebody taught me about how people track in the safari, right? So you have to just be very quiet, and then they can see what's happening. And so if you can tune off a little bit from the noise, you will see it. And somebody taught me that, right? We're at a moment right now that we could go to break down or break through.
Yes.
And I think that's where finance can tip it the right way.
Yes. And the signal, just to add on that, because we didn't get to that today, and we still have some time, we'll take many more questions. Every choice we make is putting a signal out, like every choice. And so that signal will connect you then to all the people and all the organizations that are on that wavelength or on that platform. So every micro and macro choice is we're signaling out. This is a signal out. We're voting right now with our time and our energy what's important to us. So every act is a vote towards the world we want to be in. I don't know who to call on. This is so hard. How about you right here? Wait for the microphone, please, so we make sure to get it on the record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you mentioned on the myth of around social impact and the misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what social impact is about. So I was wondering, I'm the managing editor of Karma, which is a social impact platform for investors who have that set of values. So what other obstacles do members of the panel see in terms of getting that message across, either in terms of different financial instruments that you see? There's a lot of greenwashing, a lot of green bonds. What kind of misunderstandings do you see in this space?
Yeah, the first one is that you're going to make a sacrifice in your investment return by investing in a ESG or socially conscious mutual fund or exchange traded fund. And you know, there is a challenge because the vast majority of companies manage mutual funds and exchange traded funds for all of you to buy that are not socially conscious, right? So in the socially conscious space of investing is growing. It's the fastest area of growth, which is wonderful. But compared to the overall, it's still relatively small. So there's a lot of myths to be had, but to work through. But the more that you can talk about it, and I think what's really cool about this stuff is that it's really fun to research. And you wouldn't think about researching being very fun versus like watching Bachelorette, which I am going to try a DVD that I'm going to watch tonight. Don't judge me. But I do watch it. But actually, this type of research is really cool because there are fantastic options out there right now where you can invest in a basket of stocks that focus on promoting women and have the largest number of women in managerial positions. There are baskets of stocks and mutual funds and ETFs also that have the highest pay parity between men and women. I mean, what's so exciting about this is that the world is your oyster of the different options we now have, whether it's green investing or microloans to women in areas that are severely economically constrained. the world is your oyster. So you start to do this research and you start to talk about it. Particularly women, we don't talk about money. We'd rather talk about venereal diseases, whether or not, we're having hot flashes. And at least I knew when I was pregnant, our labor stories, right? And your painful labor stories. But we don't talk about money, right? So we need to start this conversation. And we have to be the ones in this room to do it. It's really important. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of women do that I think is really cool is they'll do book clubs, and every other month they read a different book about money and they talk about it. None of them are financial planners, but they talk about it and think about all the learning there and all the talk that you have. So how do we bust through those myths? We start to get more educated, but also we have to be the ones to start that conversation.
Yes. Thank you. Next, I actually want to introduce Dawn Gallagher. She's the other. Dawn is the other co-founder of Women Power Our Planet and is a best-selling author and brand ambassador and supports model activists in connecting to sustainable products as influencers and is deeply engaged in this conversation. So please.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. Truly, I'm blessed to have you all here. This panel is incredible, isn't it? Just a great group of people. And I also want to thank Julie Polin and Mira. We all started Women Power Our Planet because I wanted women to feel empowered, whether we had hundreds of millions of dollars or $100 in the bank. I want to read this little poem that is by Brene Brown that I felt was very apropos for tonight. It says, "Courage is contagious. A critical mass of brave leaders is the foundation of an internationally courageous culture. Every time we are brave with our lives, we make the people around us a little braver and our organizations bolder and stronger." So I just want to share a little thing. And I want to talk about Amalgamated for a minute. I was one of these women that do not have $100 million in the bank, but I had some money, and I had been with the same bank. I'm not going to call out the bank, but I had been with them for 30 years. And I realized that this bank was not investing in my values. I, decided that I wanted to find a bank that was socially responsible, that invested in women's initiatives, that was green, that didn't invest in the fossil fuel industry. And so I went to Amalgamated Bank. This was several months ago, before I even knew Anna. And I opened a bank account. Everybody said, how could you switch your bank? You've been here with your same bank for years and years and years. And I said, but I have to do something. I want to do something to make a difference. So Amalgamated, I switched. They gave me this little card when I opened my checking account. And every $10 I spend, 10 cents automatically goes towards whether it's a solutions project, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that later, or women's initiatives, or socially responsible communities. And it's very empowering. So later, if you get a chance, I'd like you to talk to each, we're going to have a room back there. Everybody's going to be able to go in there and ask more questions. So please do. Thank you again for all being here, and pass it back to you, Mira.
Thank you. And we'll take a few more questions, but I want to just take a moment and acknowledge a few more people that are in the audience, and I see the tons of questions. So we will probably get to maybe 5 more of them. But first, I want to acknowledge that Jen Monahan of Financial Gym is here. Hi, Jen. Thank you. And she'll be in the intentional mingling room after as well. And then Marcella and Vivian from One Ocean Beauty are here, I think. They're our beauty sponsors. Are you guys here? Are they here, Dawn? No? Well, they sponsored beauty products that are here. There are some party bags for a group of people from their product, One Ocean Beauty, that they'll be on one of our next panels. We'll hear more. And then Clara Von Dreek, are you here? I'm here. Oh, Clara. Clara's the director of Divest Invest. Many of you have probably heard of. And then Francois Ballet. Ah, wonderful. UN Division of Ocean Affairs. Thank you for being with us. Anne de Carbuccia. Ah, One Planet, One Future. Wonderful. And Kasha Patel. Cassia. Oh. She was here. Well, she was with Oceanic Global. And then Mary Heglar with NRDC. Thank you. And Jessica Jones. In the audience, she was on our list. She's with Now Drawdown. And Ted Janulis with the Explorers Club. All right, welcome. Thank you. And then also I want to acknowledge Alan Steinfeld, who's filming us. He is a pioneer and speaker of new realities and really a spearhead of consciousness right now. Thank you for filming us and being with us. Yes. So I want you all to just know who's here, and then I haven't even named all the rest of you, but I wanted to name a few names that you might not recognize so you can kind of have the benefit of knowing who's here while we're kind of socializing a bit after. So I will take a few more questions. Let's see those hands. How about you in the back, in the black?
Hi, I'm a filmmaker as well, and I'm working on a documentary which seems kind of crazy now that I'm here and I've listened to so many of your stories. It's about a woman who 25 years ago started spontaneously channeling voices that ended up being languages of Amazonian tribes deep in the Amazon. With the help of John Perkins and an anthropologist at the Smithsonian, she was able to translate these messages, and what they were broken messages about our future on this planet, about the environmental destruction. And before she was able to fully translate this, it's a longer story than this, so I'm going to just keep it short. If you're interested, talk to me after. But before she was able to really find out the ending to what these tribal people wanted to share, this anthropologist passed away. And so our documentary is going to follow her as she goes down to the Brazilian Amazon and meets with these tribes to translate this message for humanity. Now, one of the issues that we've had with funding this project is that I've been dealing with people who perhaps aren't as conscious. So I've found some of the feedback to be like, oh, this is a little woo-woo, or let me know how this goes for you. And in applying for grants and in taking that route, we found that we don't exactly fall under the environmental umbrella, that it is a little paranormal. There is a spiritual aspect to it that is a little bit strange. But we personally believe that this is our purpose to try and get this out to the masses. It's told through the story of, told through the eyes of a Midwestern woman. And I even just met with an advisor before this session, and he had said to me, it's a great story. She's just not attractive. Perhaps you can put some makeup on her. And so perhaps that's something I'm generating, but it does seem like I'm being met with that kind of resistance. And we did screen here at the assemblage like 6 months ago, so we have followed up on a lot of people, but how do you get the capital, how do you secure the capital to back a project like this? And how can you speak to people who aren't in this world or who aren't as, I don't know, call it evolved, as us to get behind our project and take the risk with us, especially since a lot of people have been burned already with previous documentaries that they've been a part of.
I can speak. Either of you? Well, one thing I can say is in this newer conversation that's emerging, there are a lot of other communities that I'm connected to, one being Lynn Twist. She's the author of The Soul of Money. She has a whole circle where the whole basis of why she's channeled resources towards the sacred headwaters in the Amazon is she heard in a dream the indigenous people speaking to her and asking her to send resources there. So my whole message really is that it's opening up our channels of communication so that these resources can travel, and that's really what I think is collective abundance. And so hearing these voices from indigenous cultures and the wisdom that wants to come through from our higher selves, from our, whatever language we want to use, from unity, from oneness, as we as we lessen the programming and the conditioning from the older paradigms, from the old programming, we can open up the channels to that type of information that wants to come through. And then as a society, we'll become less attached to the vessel that is coming through, and that's the work of our own leadership, is to let some of that go. That's just our human nature and ego and whatever. So the best that we can, not judge that that's happening, and recognize that we all kind of have inauthenticities and things to let go of so that like the higher good can happen. And I think that's what this evolutionary process looks like. And money is just giving us the example to look at ourselves.
And just, Dawn, just the same thing, but just continue to trust. She clearly was given some very powerful messages.
Yeah.
And there's no chance that you are now a film person in custody of those. So when you have those challenges, don't look at the challenges, just take a breath and continue to trust. And call in the spirit guides, call in the rest of us to collaborate in the new way that this is all coming together. And then the hardest thing in the world is then surrender, right?
Yeah.
We all know that one, right? Because you never know where that path takes you. And if you're too focused on that end, then you might miss the surprises on the way, because dancing in the joy of synchronicity and magic is the place we're all being called to in this moment. And it is happening at an incredibly rapid pace. And so staying awake and being here and courageously collaborating with love, entering a conversation with, how can I help you? And mean it is the beginning. And then the rest works. So just keep trusting.
Yes, that's just a huge principle of this economy, is leaving in with asking how we can help, how can we give first, and just universe is open. Yes, you right there in the black dress.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diana. I'm originally from Ecuador. I've been living in New York for the past 15 years. I work in Wall Street, as you ladies. So I was working in finance for a very long time, and then I found out that that job was not fulfilling at all. Yes, money was great and bought me whatever I wanted, but I was feeling empty. And after analyzing myself, I realized that I need to make an impact and change in the world. And that's when living in Ecuador basically I was born and raised in Ecuador, and living there, I knew how poverty is in a third world country. Like, if you guys never been in South America, I urge you to go so you can witness for yourself how lucky we are to be here. We have pretty much everything we need in this life. And so living there, a lot of the kids, they're not able to go to school because they don't have the means, they don't have shoes, they don't have bicycles, they don't have backpacks. Some of them, they had to travel up to 2 hours just walking, crossing the mountains, just to get to any rural school in the mountains. So then I started working with these, I opened a non-profit organization here in New York, and one of the challenges that I found, it was also the founding. I asked every single friend to donate whatever they wanted, backpacks, shoes, clothing, books, anything they wanted, so I can ship it over to Ecuador. But then working along the lines, I found different issues. For example, like, I was in a community, and then I found out that a lot of young girls, 14 and 15 years old, they are going into prostitution because they don't know how to do anything. They don't know any trades. So then I have another program where we teach the girls how to do something. It can be nails, haircut, or they can learn how to cook or something, so they don't have to rely on anyone. And a lot of the problems too is they have to depend on their husbands, or they have to depend on someone to give them financial help. So then along the line also have different issues that people approach me, like, for example, in the Amazons, a lot of them, they don't have.
You? I just, since we're short on time,
Yes.
and I love everything you're saying, what is your question?
So the question is, as I go, I have different projects. So how do I make this project more priority, or how do I work with all the projects that I want to work, and how to prioritize? Because I'll get confused. I'm like, I want to do it all. Like, I want to help them. I want to do something for them because I can do it for them. But how can I put in priority, number 1, number 2, and number 3? How, ladies, you do it in order to put everything in priority?
powerful question.
I mean, first, do you have a good team? Sorry? No. So I think it starts with the team, and yes, I think I would say it starts with the team. So if you don't have a team, I would think that would say stage number one. Getting an advisory group, so from a kind of like structural setup, getting a good advisory group, having a good board, having a good team, like that would give you a little bit of more breathing space to be able to, to execute, I would say, faster and smarter. Fundraising is very, very hard. It is hard, and that 2% doesn't include you and I, by the way. Yeah. So it becomes very hard. So I'm happy to talk to you also because there's groups here. Is it an NGO? Yeah. Because there is also, the foundation. There's a lot of foundations. There's a lot of research. It just needs to be done. You need a team to be able to do it, but everything is doable. So I'm happy to talk to you, about it. But for sure, get a team. I think the team will make a big difference into how you feel and what you see and what you're able to say yes and no.
Thank you. I completely agree, getting a team. And one thing I would add is, do you have a coach? Yeah, coaching. Coaching for prioritizing and accountability. I mean, I just believe we should all have a mentor be mentored, have a coach be coached, like plug into that, like a lineage of support in that way. And truly, again, not as a plug, I don't gain anything, but you can go get free money coaching from Capital One. I say free in just that there's no risk or an investment. And there's a whole exercise on prioritization. So there's frameworks and tools and support and coaches that can really help illuminate that so that you feel really clear and aware as to like what are the next steps to keep moving. And the team is critical. So see right here, Georgie's son. This is, I think, is going to be our last question for tonight. I know. Okay, maybe one more. We'll do one more.
So,
oh man,
what can I as a young person do to help?
Aww. Thank you for that beautiful question.
Skip school.
What'd you say?
Skip school.
From
So,
his mother.
Lucas, I love that question. You're awesome. And one of the things I will tell you is don't fall into this confusion that you think adults have it figured out, because they don't. And keep trusting in yourself, and it doesn't matter how old you are, your voice is important.
Yeah. And I would say also your voice can be more important than adults because people are more likely to listen to you because us adults are talking about this all the time. And I think you heard the reaction when you asked that question of what can I do to help. You heard from everyone. And you have the ability to incite that in people of look at this amazing boy who wants to make a difference, then searching inside, oh my God, I should be making a difference. So I think you have even more power and influence to be able to make a difference. Yeah.
Thank you. So if you are enjoying this conversation tonight, I have a request of you. And that is, take a photo of yourself and some people here and post it on social media. And if you can put hashtag WPUP, Women Power Our Planet, that is a signal that this conversation's happening, it's continuing, you are here, it matters. So please post on social media. We have an Instagram page, Women Power Our Planet. Please follow us there. Our website is up, womenpowerourplanet.org, and you can sign up on there if you'd like to receive just information for future events and ways to get involved. There'll also be lists, I think, going around in the room if it's easier for you just to put your name on a list so you can be added to our newsletter. And we are having one thing I will say, and we are going to do one more question, but one other thing I just want to dangle that we'll be doing in the future is in August we're going to host an event for women. I'm spearheading this and would love it to be a co-creative experience. But I'm thinking cupcakes, women, fun, and withdrawing our funds out of banks with joy and with love. That's awesome. With no judgment. Yeah. I'm consciously uncoupling with my bank. And I would love you to join me. And we'll probably look at a handful of banks, yeah. And again, we'll be clear and honest and transparent in our communication, but without judgment, but just to speak to why we're making our decision, and really have a good time doing that and do it in the supportive community. And then we'll have some other events where we can then invest and deposit and channel our resources into banks that feel good and are aligned with each person's personal choice. So I would love you all to be a part of that with me, and that's something we'll send out from our website too. So thank you for that, yes. And one more question right there.
I am absolutely gobsmacked, as we say in Ireland, by your wisdom, because when I was growing up, money was the most disgusting, filthy word. It was not allowed. And I'm just thinking, if we could take your power and start to educate the school kids, so we didn't have to, we came out thinking that money is useful, we can be beneficial to others with money and to ourselves with money. So how do you feel we could do that? Can I help?
I think you just started it.
So many more questions. Should I take more? Yeah, that's what I'm planning. So still in it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so now's that time that I feel really sad because I see so many more really rich questions. Oh, did you have something? He did it. Yes. This is the time. So this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Okay? So stay with us. Let's keep going. And the next part is going to take place, the conscious mingling. So all of us, anyone whose name I mentioned, Dawn, Julie, Stephen, we're all going to be in that room. And maybe we all go in there and then we just end up all coming back out here. That could happen. But there's material in there. And my hope for each of you is that you create for yourself one clear action step you're going to take. One kind of aligned takeaway for yourself. And then also, I want you to feel complete in at least tonight's conversation. So if you have something burning you still want to know from one of our guests, find them and ask them and have that more intimate conversation in there. And please join us as we continue to divest and invest and live within our values, supporting the planet and each other. Thank you for coming.